Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh. Just a quick sound test. Sabrina, can you hear me? I've unmuted you.
Oh, okay, thank you. Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, let's get started. Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh. Thank you for joining today's webinar hosted by Sikh Research Institute. My name is Jasdeep Singh and I will be the host and moderator for today's session. The presentation will begin shortly. Before we get started, I want to review a few housekeeping items and let you know how you can participate in today's event. I will then provide information about the Sikh Research Institute and Sabrina Atwal, our presenter, before turning it over for the main presentation. You're looking at an example of the GoToWebinar attendee interface. It's made up of two parts. The viewer window on the left, which allows you to see everything the presenters will share on their screen, and the control panel on the right. Use the orange arrow to open and close the control panel. The audio pane provides audio information. By default, you've joined the webinar via mic and speakers. If you prefer, you can join the audio via telephone by selecting Use Telephone, and the dial-in information will be displayed, including the audio pin. Questions during the webinar should be directed to the moderator, which is me. You can send your questions either by typing it in the attendee panel, or you can ask it over the mic. In case you don't have a microphone, please state your name, city, and question in the questions panel. As a reminder, today's webinar is being recorded, and everyone will receive an email within 7 days with the link to view the recording of today's event. If for any reason you experience any technical difficulties during the session and you can't see the main presentation, then please do not hesitate to contact me via the chat panel. If you lose your internet connection or have to restart your computer during this session, then you can rejoin the session by clicking the URL that is included in your original confirmation email. Finally, at the end of the presentation, I'll be launching a testimonial and feedback window. We'd appreciate if you could take a few moments to provide your valuable feedback and comments on how this session went and how we can improve future sessions. I'll now provide some background to the Institute and also Sabrina. The mission of the Sikh Research Institute is to provide educational resources to Sikhs to lead a Guru-inspired life. SikhRI is an inclusive resource for you, your family, your community, and 25 million Sikhs worldwide for educational programming, strategic solutions, and Gurmukhi content. Now I'd like to take a minute to introduce our presenter and also talk to you about SIDDIC, which is SikhRI's flagship leadership development program that is offered annually. But first, our presenter. Our presenter today is Sabrina Atwal. She is project director at the Indo-Canadian Women's Association, where she works with young girls and women from South Asian communities to address harmful cultural practices and prevent gender-based violence. She's on the board of Alberta Network of Immigrant Women and was recently appointed chair of the Making Change Youth Advisory Council. Recently, Sabrina was profiled as a top 30 under 30 by the Alberta Center for Global Cooperation. SikhRI would also like to take a moment before we start to invite you to join us this summer in San Antonio, Texas, from 28th July through August 10th for intensive immersion in Sikh culture, language, values, and community through heightened understanding of Bani, Tariq, and Rahat. When you register for SIDDIC, you select a focus for your classroom session from 1 to 3 tracks: SikhRI 101, SikhRI 201, and Gurmukhi 101. You spend half your days in specialized classroom sessions with others who have chosen the same track. Later in the afternoon, the group comes together for SikhRI leadership development workshops, presentations, and activities. SIDDIC also features special nights set aside for talent shows, ultimate frisbee, a trip into downtown San Antonio, nature walks, and other activities to provide bonding and inspiration. Every year we hear back from Siddiq alumni about how valuable the bonds they've formed as Siddiq have been in terms of friendships, networking, and continued academic and spiritual development. Please visit our website for more details at www.sikhri.org. We are currently accepting applications for all tracks, but don't delay, especially if you're planning on traveling from outside the US or Canada, as the visa process can take several months. You can also like us on Facebook too, and follow us on Twitter to get news on upcoming Siddiq announcements, videos, and to stay informed of new resources in general, like this webinar that you're attending today. Now, I'd like to pass it over to Sabrina to begin today's presentation. Give me one moment while I transfer presenter rights to Sabrina. Okay, Sabrina, you should be good to go.
Thank you. Okay, get set up. Jazzy, is that okay?
Yes, I can see that.
Okay. Okay, good. All right. Thank you very much for having me. I want to thank the Sikh Research Institute for inviting me to be a part of this webinar. And I want to thank those of you that have logged in to join the discussion today. This is my first time doing a webinar, and it's quite different for me for two major reasons. One is I can't see you, or I can't see who I'm speaking to, which will be interesting. And I am speaking on a topic that I normally I work in. I don't really speak on, actually, like reflecting on the work that I do. So I've been asked by the Sikh Research Institute to speak on how to break the cycle of violence. And it's quite a big question, and I thought about the ways I could address this. Usually I speak on educating on harmful cultural practices and forms of violence against women, and I work with women and girls in that area. But I thought the best thing that I could do, the most purposeful webinar I could give, would be something that you could take away and use in your daily life. So I would try to give you realistic and pragmatic ideas on ways you can implement positive changes in your community starting today regarding the prevention of gender-based violence. Before I begin, I hope that we can have a dialogue on this webinar. You are able to ask questions, and I hope you do, because I think that's the best type of learning there is when there's a discussion. And I hope that definitely you can take away things from here that you can use starting today. So basically, I wanted to start off with talking a little bit about myself, and through that, I can tell you how my faith has actually inspired me to continue in this area of work. I have been working at the Indo Canadian Women's Association for almost 3 years now as a project director, and my role there is to initiate community mobilization to mobilize women and girls to help prevent violence against women, act as mentors in their community, and work with various community agencies on preventing violence against women in diverse communities like ours. The reason that I started in this kind of work is quite interesting, and I think you should know. I learned a couple of years ago that violence against women is the most socially accepted of human rights violations in the world, and it truly is. And recently you might have heard that people are calling income inequality the biggest social issue of our time. But I really believe that gender inequality is the biggest social issue of our time, and there's a lot of work to be done in that area as a society. Think about how we can progress successfully as a society if we're discriminating against half the human population all the time. I started working at the Indo Canadian Women's Association shortly after I graduated from university, and I heard of a woman in my neighborhood who had been shot 8 times by her husband, and the shooting was a result of a domestic dispute that had been going on for years, I learned later on. Not knowing the woman, I was so compelled to go to her funeral just after hearing the gruesome details of the end of her life. And for someone who was not involved in community activity, someone who's not involved in the issue of violence against women or gender-based violence, I really, I can't tell you why it struck me, except the fact that she was a human being who had been shot 8 times, and I wanted to pay my respects. She left behind 2 young sons who live in my neighborhood still, and I still see those 2 boys walking to and from school mostly every day around 4:30. So it reminds me of her every day as well. And this was a very important time in my life when this issue really struck a chord with me. Anyways, I went to her funeral, and nobody spoke about the issue that actually had taken her life, the domestic violence. And so I was, it was like as if, she had just passed away without speaking about what really happened. And when I was leaving, many people from our community, the Sikh community, many respected people here in our community in Edmonton, and many men and women were asking a question. They were asking, what did she do? And I was kind of taken aback because they were asking, what did she do, as if there was some justifiable reason that he had to shoot her 8 times. And they were looking for ways to justify what had happened, what kind of things did she do before that happened, that she provoked him, and there must be something to justify his behavior. And I was just shocked by this response. And so the question that really inspired me to action for myself was, what can I do at that time in my life when this issue had become just so prominent for me? I decided to ask myself, what can I do if this is the attitude towards women who get murdered, and then people are, trying to find justifiable reasons as to why it had to happen. So that's kind of the reason why I got involved in this area. And as soon as I started working with communities at the Indo-Canadian Women's Association, I learned about very prominent or dominant ideas or beliefs about women. On your screen right now, you're seeing a quote, raising a daughter is like watering a neighbor's garden. After I started working with communities and doing focus group and community consultations with women and men and youth, some lady had just raised her hand very, very sweetly and mentioned, this is what I grew up hearing all the time from my parents, and this is kind of an Asian proverb she mentioned to me. And the more I looked into it, I was more keen on learning about this kind of belief, and I think it's imperative in acknowledging this kind of belief if you want any kind of social change in this area, because this kind of belief perpetuates the low status woman in our society. So raising a daughter is like watering your neighbor's garden, really indicating that a female is a transient member of the family who will eventually leave, so it's okay if you invest in her less. Another major reoccurring theme in my work I learned working with communities and talking with them very candidly was, first of all, violence against women is normal. It's always happened. It will always happen. Why are you even trying? That was the question. And second of all, from our community more specifically, it was, it's just cultural. It's just our culture. And for someone who is a Sikh Canadian, born in Canada, mostly very proud of my heritage, I never believed that violence was our culture or innate in our culture. And I didn't think anybody really thought that. But the more I worked with communities, the prominent theme was that it's just how our culture is. It's just the status of women in our culture. It's just something you have to accept. And so that was kind of, that was very interesting for me to learn, and then I was more inspired to continue, or more inspired to actually work in this area. Um, in our community, I think the most damaging thing in this area of work is that it's almost taboo to talk about violence against women, and it's the silence that is the most damaging to this issue, because a lot of people think that it doesn't happen in our community, or if it's happening, it happens to the people that are not respectable or struggling people. But it actually is very common in all socioeconomic, classes, and definitely in our community. It's common. I can say here in Edmonton. And I think, and in this webinar, I was trying to think of ways I could give you ideas to, implement positive changes in your community. And the first thing I would definitely recommend is it's time to really break the silence. It's really time to bring this issue into public consciousness, and that means it starts with you. That means discussing it with your parents or with your family or with your kids, in schools and any public spaces. It's definitely time to break the silence, and that's kind of the main purpose that I wanted to really begin with. We have to talk about these issues. Before I go any further, I just wanted, I've been doing community consultations for about 2 years and just discussing these issues and trying to bring these to a forefront in our community. And for the most part, people have been very supportive, especially a lot of older gentlemen have been very supportive of these issues. But here are some kind of main themes that I got from focus groups with women. After I talked to women from our community. Males dominate. They are providers and protectors of the family. Boys are more important, as they will take care of their parents. A girl is a transient family member who will move into another family. A woman who gives birth only to daughters does not have any respect. And a status woman who is raised when she gives birth to a son. And these are all from women that I've spoken to from our community. And some other ones are a woman, if she doesn't want to get beat up by her husband, then she can actually stop it. She can prevent it. She can learn to do better. That was one quote from an woman I was in a focus group with. Another one, just to identify the kind of belief system there is around women and around this issue. One woman said, I was told by my father-in-law to, try not to have a son. If I have a son, she was pregnant. If I have a son, then it will put like a bad luck on me for about seven years. That's what he told her. So there's definitely son preference is a big problem in our community, and it can lead to gender selective abortion and other kind of perpetuate other kinds of discrimination and violence against women from our community. Now, I started working in this area, and it seems like all the time the media and other outlets are always raising these issues, but we're normalized because we're seeing it all the time, so we normalize it, and then we are desensitized from it. So I'm also asking that you tune into these issues, and recently, you've seen what kind of things are out there, and I keep asking myself, what kind of world do you want to live in? What kind of world do I want to live in? You can see the pictures on your screen right now of the woman in Punjab who was harassed and also beaten for complaining about harassment. And then this is a big case right now in the United States, where I believe many of you are, the rape case, where not only is it okay to violate her because she's under the influence or she deserves it, apparently, it's also okay to take pictures of it and use it as entertainment. And then this shirt underneath that you're seeing, Keep Calm and Hit Her, was being, just recently, a couple of weeks ago, was being sold on Amazon by a company who manufactured these shirts. And another shirt that they had, in addition to this one, was Keep Calm and Rape a Lot. So this is the kind of world that we live in right now, and this is the kind of this is a situation for women, and if you're not in this situation, your sisters are. And as a woman, I find this extremely unacceptable, and as a Sikh woman, I find this extremely unacceptable because in my learnings about my faith, social justice and equality are the main pillars, I would say, in my readings of this issue. So what can you do? It's obviously a very daunting issue. It's very large, but there are steps that you can take, in my experience, that have made an impact, because you just have to change the attitudes of the people that are right with you, because that's how you can create kind of a longer-term ripple effect, is by changing the attitude of the people in your circle. That's more than anything, more than one person can do. That's great if you can do that. So I would say break the silence, like I said before. And in front of you, you're seeing a photo campaign that our youth group at our agency worked on creating, because they wanted to be part of the dialogue. And so just because you can't see it doesn't mean it's not there, because the numbers prove otherwise. It is there. It's getting worse. And so this is kind of a image that we have put up around our area here to remind people that it is happening, and this is the state of women's rights right now, and the safety of women is at stake all the time. In my experience, and now I'm talking about break the silence, and just very briefly I'll tell you my experience with working in this area for as long as I have. It's been that there is a parallel in the silence that is expected of victims of violence in order to protect the perpetrators from authorities. What I mean by that is often women will come in to our office and ask for help, and it's at their they're at their wits' end. They are in a very bad situation, and I ask, why didn't you come in before, when you maybe could have gone for counseling or something, or other interventions, and now you're coming in when it's the worst. And they obviously they were asked to keep it silent. They were supported by their families and their communities to keep it silent, and now they're coming basically when it's too late. And this silence that they're feeling, I felt very quickly once I, as an advocate or somebody working in this area, started to feel as well that parallel silence, or that expectation to be silent about these issues. So once I started speaking publicly about these issues and working with communities, obviously you become known for these things if you're speaking on them or working on them. And I learned really fast that the fact that I belong to a certain community, the fact that I belong to a certain faith, and the fact that I look the way that I did, so I'm a young Sikh woman, Canadian, people would come up to me from our community and ask me, don't you think that you're putting us in a vulnerable situation as a community? Don't you think you're opening our community up for more racism or more prejudice because you're talking about violence against women in our community only? And so I felt that I was being asked to not talk on these issues so I can shield my community that obviously I'm representing. I can shield my community from racism or prejudice. And my response to that was, I mean, why does the issue of violence against women get trumped by prejudice or racism? You should be more worried about the fact that women from your community are suffering in silence or living as prisoners in their own home, and you know it. People know it. But there is an unwillingness to accept that, but there's more of an expectation to keep up a certain front about our community and not really dig deep into what's really going on. And so the silence is actually one of the worst things in this issue, especially in our community, because I myself felt it as somebody working in this area, and I was asked many times or in interviews from our community, don't you think that you're speaking on these issues and people are going to think it's only us this is happening to? and it was more about keeping up a certain image rather than when I was speaking about the numbers and the cases that I've seen and the women that we've been working with. That was put across like under the rug, but it was more about our community and the image of our community. So obviously, I, as a young woman belonging to the Sikh community, I had a lot of questions about my intentions. Like, I started wondering, am I doing this? Am I actually, creating an image for a community that I'm not proud of, and all these things? And what I decided to do was go back to the basics of my own faith, because culturally I can be seen as whatever. Culture will always change, but from the basics, my foundation, I am a Sikh woman. And so I went back to the basics of my faith, and that's where I find most of my inspiration now to continue in the work that I do, even when I'm questioned about the kind of topics I'm discussing, because I really believe that it is right to question these things and talk about these things. And so I would say, these discussions need to be brought to the public spaces. And public spaces, so if you're having a public event, it's important to raise awareness about the status of women at these public events, and ask yourself how diverse the organizing committees for these cultural events are. That second thing you can do on top of breaking the silence is bring these issues to public spaces, and that's, I wanted to go there later, but it came there now. I learned this when I was kind of doing that research into the basis of my faith and how I could be more inspired by the life of Guru Nanak. And I learned that it was Guru Nanak, for the first time in history of India and for the first time in the history of the world, perceived that there can be no enduring democratic culture unless grounded in unreserved recognition of full equality of women and men. And when I was reading about Nanak's life, I connected this because of the unreserved recognition of full equality of women and men. And if people around you don't see that, then you have to be that flag bearer. You have to be that person in your community who acts as an agent for social change, because there's so many people that are not doing it. It's essential that you do it. And when I learned this quote that you have on your screen right now, I felt more inspired to respond and continue my work, regardless of the negative feedback I was getting or the criticism I was getting working in this area. And as I learned more about the status of women in our faith, I really didn't understand why culturally it was not acceptable to discuss these things, or culturally why women from our community were at a lower status, because from a faith-based perspective, there's such equality in our faith that I started to think that our culture has definitely, the culture has somehow overpowered the pillars of our faith. And so I wanted to really bring back, even when I work with Sikh women or young women from our community, I definitely try to remind them of what our faith says about women and about our status in our own community. And so this is a very popular quote that is quoted a lot from women. Man is born, from women, man is conceived, and to women he is engaged and married. And without women there would be none at all. And so I think it's essential that these things are reminded to our youth in our community. And for a lot of the girls that I work with, they actually don't know. And they, just similar to myself when I was younger, I wasn't really fully aware of the basics of my own faith. And so now what we do at our organization is give values-based human rights education. And for many newcomers, or for immigrants, or even first-generation youth, there is kind of an assumption that human rights are in conflict with their faith-based rights or with their cultural rights. And so part of our job at our center is to show that there is no conflict. And so we do show quotes from different faith-based texts, and this is definitely one that I show. And I've seen the change in young women when they see that they are supported by their own faith, and they become more assertive rather than having a low self-esteem, which is very common in some families for young girls to be raised with like low self-esteem. I also work on the issue of harmful cultural practices. Now, harmful cultural practices are practices that have been continued for spanning generations, actually, and have been unquestioned. And because of that, they have taken on an aura of morality in the eyes of those practicing them. And some are listed in front of you, things like dowry, son preference, gender-selective abortion, honor-based conflict, and even forced marriage. And last year, I was asked to comment on this advertisement that you see in front of you, create the family you want, boy or a girl. And this was a advertisement that was posted in a publication, I would think from BC, I think it was called Indo Canadian Voice or something like that. And obviously it's banking on these services are available, that's fine, but the thing is that they are banking on our prejudice, essentially. The children in the advertisement are wearing, you know, a suit, and they are obviously, you know, advertising to our community for a reason, because they know that we have a preference for sons, and we would pay to ensure that happens. And I'm sure many of you know that the gender-sex ratio in Punjab is one of the most skewed in the world. In some parts, there's 100 females for every 130 boys that are born at this point. And so, just the implications for the world in which we're living in, I think son preference is one of the biggest issues that we're facing as a community here and at home. And these kind of advertisements being advertised to our own community, I think, is something that we need to stand up against, and we need to change these attitudes. And how we can do that is by discussing them and actually asking people that post these kind of things in our publications why they think it's acceptable. And so the more I've worked on on harmful cultural practices, I've learned that in the Guru Granth Sahib, it actually denounces these things. So on gender-selective abortion, with the slayers of daughters, whoever has social contact with him do I curse. So it clearly states that this practice is wrong. However, like I just said, in Punjab, we have the highest or the most skewed gender-sex ratio in the world, and parts of in parts of BC, I believe in Surrey, that gender-selective abortion, the ratios are changing in the Indo Canadian community as well. So these issues are very real right now, even in Canada. Again, whosoever takes food from the slayers of daughters shall die unabsolved. So these are long practicing attitudes and practices, or long-standing practices against women that have been denounced, and they are continuing. And so when I say taking back, your faith and really being a steward for your faith, it means working against these issues, because as a Sikh, I believe I'm supposed to. I believe it's right. And on Sati, a virtuous wife is not one who burned herself alive. And if you read this quote, it's just, again, denouncing all of these harmful cultural practices are still continued, and shouldn't be. So the more I looked into my own faith, the more I was inspired to act as an agent for social change in any way that I could. And one of the biggest pillars of our faith is equality, and it's essential for men and women from our community to accept that and then to stand up against it. It's one thing to believe it, and then it's another thing to speak out against it when you see injustice happening. From a temporal and spiritual point of view, woman is half man's body and assists him to the door of final liberation. So as a society, we are obviously not on our way to final liberation. We are slaves to our prejudice and our discrimination and our unwillingness to contribute to the world that we know we can create. So the third thing I would say that is essential in breaking the cycle of gender violence, just bringing it back to that, is challenging self-appointed community leaders. In my work, there's two major things that I've seen happen. And one is that if you do want things to change, it's not going to be easy, and you will be kind of given criticism or negative feedback or anything or comments because you're doing this. For instance, a young group of kids from our area are planning a skit on gender selective abortion for one of our cultural events that we have every year. And a lot of the main organizers who have been doing it for years don't want this skit to come to their cultural event because they think that, again, it's broad brushing our community. This is not what our community is about. And it's actually harmful to our community to talk about these things at cultural events. And I would say it's time for us as a community for us to really shake things up and to change things for the better and to create a safer community for our women and girls, is to challenge these self-appointed community leaders. And it's about time that we raise our voices against things that we know that have been practiced for years and years that are wrong. Ask yourself how many women are on the Gurdwara committees in your area. Ask yourself at the sports tournaments, do the girls teams get trophies and checks from different organizers like they do here? And I would say this is a very big one, because when we get cases of women who are trying to flee very violent relationships, they have been asked repeatedly by self-appointed community leaders, often affiliated with faith-based organizations like the Gurdwara, to stay in their relationship, to make it work, but not providing any social service, not providing counseling, not providing any intervention, just talking to both couples, both people in the couple, and asking them to make it work. And then, the person that is the perpetrator of the violence will stop very briefly whatever he or she is doing, but it will continue. And I really believe it's very harmful when community leaders get involved, as they are referred to, and try to fix very serious problems in families. And so I think on one side it's good, but on another side there needs to be some kind of actual professional services provided to fill that gap, so there can be long-term sustainability in any kind of peace that was created in a family. So that's my third kind of piece of advice for how to actually make positive change in your community, is by challenging those community leaders. And so I think that's all I wanted to say. I had those three things to really discuss. I'm open to questions. I hope that I have stimulated enough dialogue or enough thought to have some dialogue. So if you have any questions, please do send them to me, which I was supposed to tell you before, but you can send them to me now.
Hey, Sabrina.
Hi.
Real quick, Kulvinder Singh from Sacramento, Roseville area in California. Mm-hmm. He's shared with us, he's actually an attorney-in-law, and he shared with us a few things that I think you've already touched on, but let me go through that. He mentions that our societies, our culture is obviously very male-dominated, and which predates SikhRI also. What the gurus did was teach for a reform that people should take the message of the gurus to heart and practice versus taking more of the cultural aspect of it, as I believe you were also mentioning in your presentation. It says people
Right.
are people, you know, whether they're Punjabis or Irish or Mexicans or whatever community you may want to compare it to. But he says as long as people can take Guru's message and act on it, we may be able to make a difference here.
And I totally agree with that. And I think what's happened a little bit is that the messages has been lost or misinterpreted or just not even really acknowledged. So I appreciate that. When I'm speaking to my youth group and my young Sikh girls, I always say, you know, do you consider yourself a Punjabi Sikh or a Sikh Punjabi? So are you a Sikh first and then do you have a cultural identity, or is it your cultural identity and then your faith after? And I think it's essential that we teach our youth that it should be your faith first.
Right. We do have a question from, I have a microphone on and I can say more. Manmeet did have a comment and maybe a question here. Manmeet is from India. He might be the only one from India. He says, Manmeet, what I'm going to do is I'm going to unmute you so you can maybe comment or ask a question. So let me go ahead and do that, okay? You should be on now.
Hello.
Yes, Manmeet, we
Hello.
can hear you.
Yeah. First of all, very congratulations to everyone that you are organizing this webinar. I would like to say on Punjab that Ms. Sabrina referred to, that in my opinion, we need to differentiate between culture and religion. See, religion is totally against what all the cultural practices have creeped into our society. The practices like dowry, the practices like violence in our families, we all consider that these are to be abhorred. Okay, so I just wanted to say that on Punjab, ma'am said that in Punjab the sex ratio is very less. I would like to say that if you come to ground situation in Punjab, the Sikh religion as it is, it's waning away. Drugs and alcoholism, as I said, and pornography. I would like to appreciate the way she has said that silence needs to be broken. On pornography, I believe that silence is there in our society, and it's the worst kind of thing that our religion also disapproves of it, and it's everywhere. Everywhere there is pornography, and it has defeated, in my opinion, it has defeated our religion, and it's the main source from where all this violence is coming. Thank you.
Thank you. I did not even think about that in relation to this topic, but actually it's very much so connected in that, you know, pornography is actually very, it violates women and men, whoever, you know, engages in that. So thank you for your comment.
Sabrina, we don't have any more questions right now. Once again, this is a shout out to all the folks who are attending the webinar. If you do have more questions, it'd be great if you can ask them yourself using a mic, or please send me those questions over the questions panel. I do have a question from Anycore, and she's saying, do you think, Sabrina, if we start talking about Guru's message on women at the Khalsa schools at the Gurdwara, would that be something that we as a community should focus on?
I think it's essential, definitely. And I don't know if they don't right now, Jasdeep, like you don't think they do?
Oh, in the Khalsa schools, you mean?
Yeah.
You know, it's a hit and a miss. It all depends on the school and all depends on the teachers in the school.
Yeah, it just depends on the people. I think it's essential.
And any Corpenji is saying that they really don't. So
they really don't. Yeah. The thing is, for myself, as a young woman who was born here, and it's the Khalsa schools and the kind of community at the Gurdwara, sometimes it's not so accessible. For some reason, that's how I feel, and I know that my sentiment is shared definitely with the girls that I work with too. Is that they don't always feel as comfortable talking about these issues at a place like the Gurdwara. So I think to really make that comfort level exist, I think it's important to have supportive members of the community really talk about these issues and the status women from our faith-based perspective publicly at our gurdwaras and during the actual services, I think. And I have spoken to many faith leaders here in Edmonton who, when speaking to them, they're very supportive. However, things are not really implemented. I think there's maybe more bureaucracy. I don't really know what it will take to get these things out there. But even during the service, there always should be something referring to equality or to the status of women in our communities, or supporting our young girls. So I definitely agree it would make a great difference if these things are discussed in Khalsa school. But not only in Khalsa school, I think general people that come to the services need to hear these messages.
That makes sense, Sabrina. Thank you. I have Kulvinder again. He has a good point that he wants to share and maybe ask a question about too. Is, will you be writing something like a blog, or do you already have a blog that people can maybe read your thoughts and follow you, daily, weekly, quarterly, whatever, that you can share news of successes that women have achieved, say in your community or community that you know about and work with, that would be inspiring for everybody else.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's been asked a few times, and I don't have anything currently, but I am working on creating a blog, or we have a newsletter at work that I can regularly write in. But now that some of my responsibilities are changing at work, I definitely will be starting something. And I think if you want to stay connected with me, please stay connected via Twitter, and I will announce my my online blog in the near future. And I thank you for that question, because it makes me feel like there is an audience for this kind of discussion and dialogue other than just the people working in this area. So I will be starting that sooner than later.
Okay,
definitely.
Great. Do have a question from Taranjeet Kaur. Organizational and Gurdwara policy needs to be implemented where Gursikh women have, in capital letters, to give out prasad, do ardas, and make speeches from the stage. I do have a comment here, but I'll let you speak first, and I'll tell everybody what we might be doing here in San Antonio as an effort.
Okay, yeah, I definitely agree with that. I think a part of the problem is that women are not seen in that role, and so there is a disconnect or a disconnect in seeing them in that role. And so I definitely think that there needs to be more women just present. And in the response in India, for instance, to the Delhi gang rape was by the government. The response by the government was to actually create a women's only bank. And I just wanted to point that out, that by making only sections very gender segregated societies, it actually makes the situation much worse in the long run for women, because then it's different to see them in the public spaces, but they should be. So I agree that they should be involved in the organizational structure of the Gurdwara, and policies should be implemented to involve them in all parts of the service.
I think that's a great point too. I agree completely with that. In fact, in San Antonio, we've actually, obviously Gurdwara politics are there in every city. And here in San Antonio also, while a second Gurdwara, for example, is being built, the community in that Gurdwara has encouraged and motivated quite a few women to step up, for example, do ardas, and be the people who take the stage and either make announcements, or speeches, or whatever the case might be. One thing I have noticed is the fact that there is a certain amount of hesitancy, obviously because of maybe cultural, influences here, that people or women shy away from actually coming up to stage and saying a few words, or even taking prasad and distributing amongst the sangat and so on. So yes, I do agree that while women should be encouraged, and then whoever is encouraged should actually take upon that opportunity to do something about it. So that's a great point there.
Yeah, and I totally agree with that. And I just want to say that if some people are uncomfortable with that, that's okay. I think a big part of this issue is making people uncomfortable, quite frankly, because that's how you make things change. Is if you're doing things that people don't think should be done and it's cultural and whatnot, you need to take that first step and make them uncomfortable because they'll get over it. So it just takes courage, and I think it makes all the difference.
Absolutely. We do have a question from Nikki Singh, who is a family law lawyer from Toronto. And she says, excellent presentation, Sabrina. I'm very impressed. Regarding the silence around this issue, many social service organizations in the greater Toronto area that focus on South Asian communities, in which I'm involved in also, take a silencing stance by not wanting these issues discussed because of the concern of racism and stigmatizing communities rather than violencing against women and family violence.
Yeah, yeah.
And
That's
so as a
exactly what
Sikh,
I've experienced.
right, and she's asking, have you come across this in your work also?
That's what her question is?
Yes, and she was,
Oh, okay.
she was asking you because she has seen that in the Toronto area. Have you experienced the same thing
Yeah,
in your
absolutely.
field also?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I just spoke about it earlier, but I definitely have experienced that expectation that I shouldn't talk about these things because it's going to cause controversy about our community, and it's going to put a bad image in people's minds about us. And my question is, why does the issue of violence against women have trump racism or prejudice? That's the last thing on my mind when people are, literally dying or literally losing their families to these issues. So I think the issue itself is our community ready to openly discuss these things and openly make decisions? I know women that are in situations right now, and they can't leave their home because people will speak, people will talk about them, and they won't have any community support, they think, and their in-laws and their family is not supporting her to leave. So she's living in a room in her basement. And every night when her husband comes home and is ready to abuse her verbally and physically, and her daughter is watching, so what she has resorted to in that case is to go in her car and sleep there with her daughter all night, and then come back in the morning when he's sleeping. That's her answer to the problem. And we can't get her out of her house because the community doesn't support her, she thinks, or that people will say she left her house. We need to change that. We need to support the women that are in these situations.
That makes sense. Inigor Panji does have one question. She's saying, are you seeing this violence in the generation that is born and raised here, or is there any difference from the first generation that came here?
I'm seeing it. It's different in the current generation. The question was the ones that were born here and the ones that immigrated?
Exactly.
Okay, the ones that were born here, for the young boys, they pick up the verbal. They pick up the verbal kind of abuse, I think, from I don't know, from their family or from just the way they're raised. I don't know, because a lot of the young girls I speak to, they think that it's normal to be spoken down to or with derogatory comments, and they think that's just how the guys from our community are, and that's unfortunate. So that's something that I definitely see, and they just think that they can't change it, and that's one. And then for the newcomers, the young girls, I would say they're not as assertive as the Canadian girls. I would say, in my experience working with girls, they're not as assertive or confident, especially around men.
Okay. Gurpreet Kaur has a comment, and she says, which I guess is very common if I think about it. When my second daughter was born, some people did not even call to congratulate. We need to congratulate the birth of every baby.
Oh my gosh.
And thank you for the work that you're doing in your community.
Well, thank you. Did you experience that too, Chesty?
Um, I have a boy, so I have not experienced it, but I've seen it in my family, whether it's
Oh,
India
yeah.
or even here for that matter, that there has been some discrimination.
Definitely, it's so rampant. It's such an issue. Um, I actually have a story I was in a focus group and one woman who actually was from the Pakistani community, but I mean culturally it's very similar from Punjab and Pakistan, and she kept saying, recently we had a big problem in our family. So I said, okay, what happened? And she said, well, my brother keeps having daughters. And I was like, oh, that's the problem. That's really the problem. And she's like, yeah, they just keep having daughters and no sons. And we're all like crying every day for them because his family is just not complete and we don't know why God is, doing this to us. And that was her problem. That was her family problem. And I said, so what happened? And she said, well, my brother is threatening to divorce her now. And they've been in Canada for like 15 years. There shouldn't be such an issue. It's not a problem. They just have daughters. That's fine. But the one that kept having these daughters was being threatened with divorce. Obviously, she's going to have some kind of postpartum depression if her family doesn't even support her. And again, I'm saying they've been here for 15 years. So these are such deep-rooted issues, and we need to, like the listener said, we need to congratulate when they have a daughter. We need to also do all the things we do when they have boys. It's essential. And a lot of women are going into depression after they have girls because they think that they've done wrong, which is just, and by the way, it's the male that chooses the sex of the baby. Like it's that naturally, biologically, that's what happens. So it's very confusing how that's continuing, but definitely I see that all the time too.
Inikor Penji's asking, is there a certain age group of the women who are going through the violence?
No, it's not a certain age. Whether it's young girls who are experiencing some kind of violence while dating, that's common, and a lot of young girls don't talk about it and don't come forward because they think it's their fault because they went on a date, first of all. So they put themselves in that situation. That's what they think, especially from the girls in our community, in my experience. But no, there's no age. It's women that have been married for many years who've experienced these problems for years and years, and then there's young girls that experience it too. It's just it comes back to what they expect. And a lot of times they expect it or they accept it as the way that was their lottery in life. That's what they got because they can't make any change. If they do, they'll embarrass their family or they'll embarrass their community. And the last thing they want to do is be known as somebody like that, as a disrespectful woman who could break her family apart and these kind of things. So unfortunately, it's across the board in age.
Okay. Kulwinder, he's asking, is there a successful, like a positive story you can share with us? Not necessarily, our community, but maybe the South Asian community that you're working with, that people can take inspiration from?
Definitely. The most successful one is that our agency a couple of years ago, before I got there, is very close to a police officer that works with us all the time, and she works here in Edmonton. And getting to know her, I learned that she came from India, and it was an arranged marriage, and she loved her husband, but within the first year of marriage or so, the abuse was terrible. Just every kind of abuse you can think of was occurring, including working at the family store for long hours, not getting paid. She didn't get a winter jacket, and our winters are cold, no boots, just taking the bus. So just was not being taken care of. She called her parents in India. Her dad flew in and contacted our agency. And what we had to do, she decided she wanted to leave after she had her daughter, and her daughter was witnessing all of this abuse. So our agency had arranged for her to actually, get out of the house. We had arranged police officers will get her and whatnot. And long story short, she got out of the house. She eventually got a divorce, started living on her own with the help of various social service kind of services available in our community here. And now she's very happily married again, and she is actually a police officer herself. And so she really took the help that she got to heart, and she wanted to continue and give back. And the police officers that helped her and counseled her through her issues, she was inspired by them. That it took her many years, but she did it. She became a police officer, and now she's working on these issues here in Edmonton. And we call her all the time, and she is always available because she knows of the kind of situations people are facing. So that's a success story for sure. And in addition to that, there's actually a negative aspect of that story is that she did well, but I heard later on that her husband that was perpetrating all of the abuse did not get any kind of community repercussions. In fact, she did from the community that she left and broke her family apart. But he was seen as the victim because she left, even though for all those years during the time they were married, he was the perpetrator of the violence. So it's just how people are viewing the issue in our community. For some reason, a lot of times the perpetrators are supported or seen as victims once their wives leave. But like I said in the beginning, it is a success story because she is now giving back to the community, and she's a very popular police officer here from our community.
That's a great
story. So life
story.
can change for the positive. Yeah.
Definitely, that's a good one. Kulvinder does share that, obviously quite a few women are making it out in terms of making it big as well as more popular. And he shares Harmeet Kaur Dhillon is the vice chair of the Republican Party in California. And the Sikh Coalition and SALDEF also, which are our Sikh organizations working for our rights, do have a lot of Sikh women as volunteers, as leadership, and so on too. So I'm sure organizations like these are working towards, and I'm sure you've worked with such organizations in the past too, with cases that come along and helping them, and while they help you also at the same time.
Mm-hmm. No, that's great that they're working on it. Was that a question?
Just a comment.
There was a comment. Okay.
Just a comment, yeah. I think there are no more questions right now.
Can I say one thing? I know something that is very usually very absent from this conversation is the discussion about young boys and men who need to be engaged in this issue from the beginning as well. But recently I was discussing this with some young girls that were at our center, and they said, in our community, girls are so pressured to get educated and get good jobs and work hard because whether that be because they have to be married off or if they have to get married, who's going to marry you? That was her point. She said, but what about the guys in our communities? Like, who am I supposed to even marry? Because they're treated and pampered, since the day they were born. They don't have any motivation in life. They don't even want to complete school. They don't treat you well. She's like, what's going to happen to them? And I mean, I never thought about it that way. The harm that we're doing to our own men and boys in our community when we're raising them with such preference and entitlement. And that's something that I just wanted to point out because we're always talking about, the girls issue and the repercussions for girls. But what about our boys? I have a younger brother, and I hope that he's just as ambitious as us, and he feels that he can go and should go and do things. That's just a point that I had to make about that. Are there any questions? Jasdeep?
Oh yes, I'm sorry, I was muted and I didn't realize it. Sorry about that. Couple of comments just from Kulvinder Singh, who says for us to all to stay in Chardi Kala, which is in high spirits, and Inni Korpanji is saying that is indeed an issue, that boys are treated with preference, and hopefully that doesn't get to their heads.
Yeah, for sure.
And everybody's congratulating for a great presentation today.
Thank you, and please send me your comments and messages on Twitter. My Twitter is up there, SA Atwal, and I would love to even continue these conversations. And I find a lot of inspiration when I meet people that are from our community of doing or believing in the same kind of things. So please contact me.
Great. So thank you for all your questions. And if you do have more questions, as Sabrina mentioned, please send those questions directly to her or to info@sikhri.org, and we can forward the questions to her. Also, please be reminded that these webinars are provided for free, but there is a cost associated with this technology and administration. If you feel you've benefited from this particular webinar or others in the past, please consider becoming a webinar sponsor. More details can be obtained at www.sikhri.org. Sabrina, do you have any closing comments, or would this be it?
No, I thank you for having me, and I just appreciate the opportunity. So thank you so much, and thanks, Justy, for moderating.
Okay, great. Thank you, Sabrina. I'm going to end the webinar by saying, once I end the webinar, you'll see a feedback and testimonial forum pop up on your screens in a browser. Please go ahead and take a few moments in providing us with feedback in how we can make these webinars better in the future. We are here to serve you guys, and would like to do a good job as much as we can. So thank you again for joining us. We had a great time, and Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh.